The Strain Season 3, Episode 8, White Light. Now, there are a lot of little stories in this episode. We had some really good stuff for Gus, and we learned about his backstory with his parents and his, the reason he has such a deep connection to his mother outside of she's his mom. There's a very personal connection that they had, a very personal experience that they had to deal with. We also have Eph and Dutch actually forming a relationship, which I was curious if that was going to happen, but they really kicked it up in this episode, and then it flat out, they at least made out. Who knows if it'll evolve into an actual relationship, but they at least made out in this episode. We have the stuff with Setrakian, at least by the end, it's kind of hard to really call it its own story. You kind of had like a couple of scenes, but it becomes something very big by the end of the episode for sure. And then of course we have, I had my names mixed up. I was thinking of Eichorst, but Eichorst had his little thing, and Setrakian and Fet had their little thing as well. They had like, basically, they kind of had like half the story or a third of the episode really, but they're trying to figure out, they get their little extra information from Palmer, who's like, he's super upbeat and he wants to get his revenge on the guy that was kicking him off his boat. He's, back in his angry form. So, they have their story. They're trying to track down exactly what's happening, if it's going to end up being a master, which, unfortunately, it appears to be the case. We get the crate and everything. It's a big wooden crate. It says it's from Egypt, and that seems to be the only logical thing to me, is that it's actually going to end up being another master, another ancient. So, not mentioned, I think it makes the most sense it would just be one other ancient, because otherwise if it was like three of them, that would be it. Like, New York's done. The world is probably done, but it's one new ancient. I doubt they're going to kill the master. I do think that it'll be two ancients working together. It'll be the master and then another ancient as well. So, it's going to be getting nuts very soon. And unfortunately, I didn't realize this until the episode went off, but it's only one episode left until the season finale. So, we only have 2 more episodes left, which really sucks, because it means, especially with the crate coming in this episode, I have to assume it means that this crate won't get opened until the finale. It's like, oh, this and this and this will happen next week, and then the week after, when we get the finale, that's when we're gonna end up seeing, the new master get released or whatever. And then it's like, all right, there's that, and then cliffhanger until next year, unfortunately. But it already has me excited for the next season, knowing that we only have 2 episodes left, which, like I said, does suck, because I wanted to see this master get released for at least like a couple episodes this season, and then it goes into the next season. But it makes a lot of sense. The master gets released. That is an epic cliffhanger, so we already know what's coming now for the cliffhanger. Unless they do release the master next week, and then they release the new ancient and then kill the master, that would be nuts. So who knows? Who knows how it's gonna play out? But it got nuts in this episode. Setrakian and Fet, they end up going back to the building that Fet tried to blow up last season, and they find out that there is actually basically a human feed machine. It's still there, and it's basically in working condition. I'm assuming, because I was trying to figure out what those other parts were and stuff that weigh like a bunch of tractors. I'm guessing it was parts for the feeding machine, and so it's like the incinerator and stuff like that. So they have that set up, which is a crazy opening with Eichorst and the new guy, and it's like, oh, okay, this dummy is not going to be the same as a normal human, and he just picks like the assistant dude and just slams him on there, and that was real messed up. I was like, dang, he just slammed him on there, and they go through and he's wiggling around and stuff like that, and he's like, what's the time? And he's like, oh, it's like 2 minutes instead of like the 84 seconds or whatever. And he's like, oh, so it's a huge difference than what was projected, so you need to fix this. And he's like, okay. And it was just like, wow, that's a messed up scene. And like the guy was trying to fight back before it started up, he like hits the button away from the dude, and I was like, man, this is kind of hard to watch, because he's just doing this thing. He knows what's happening. He knows who he's dealing with. These are the monsters destroying the city. And he's kind of just going through with it. And then they screw up this whole little situation using a dummy. I was like, okay, well, now you're the test. And when he just plopped him up there, just the way he was wiggling around, and he's being a perfect example. To Eichorst's point though, where he's wiggling around, and he's trying to hold himself up with one arm and like swing with the other and try to get off. And I was like, man, this is actually crazy. And like, I couldn't even imagine how that would feel to just have a hook just shot straight through you, and then he gets drained. They didn't take him down because I was thinking, like, if he didn't get killed from being impaled, if it didn't hit anything vital and he got drained, technically he's fine. Like, they could just take him off, and it's like, hey, sorry, do a little work, check the wound where the hook went, but just do a little work and let him sit there. His blood will come right back. He could live, but it seemed like they just left him there the whole time to just die. So he's probably dead now. Who knows? But they have that scene where the guys find it, and it's like, holy crap! Like this, this is basically a feeding machine. It's just draining people, and it's made to take them out. So of course now they know that things are going to become more processed and streamlined. It's not just going to be mass chaos. Their plan is to up the ante and be like, all right, now we have a feeding machine. We drain the blood, burn the bodies. Drain the blood and burn the bodies. Very simple, and that's a very calculated move. That's not just, oh, we're hiding in nests here and there, and we're getting humans when we can. That's a very calculated step. So now they know that things are going to really be kicked up a notch. And I'm sure they experience that by the end of the episode when Eichorst goes against the other ancients. And we have a really awesome scene for Quinlan during that portion. And I'm assuming he survived. I'm assuming the other ancients do not survive, though. But that was a phenomenal scene. Like, he goes there and he's like, look, things are about to get nuts. It really is an ancient. What the heck? Basically, it's just like, hey, is it possible that this is really what's happening? Is it really another ancient? Because that's what we think it is. We're pretty sure it is because it's a big winning crate. Is it though? Like, is it possible? And then they get surrounded. Eichorst comes in with just a big swarm, and he just has this little briefcase, which becomes it was almost like a nuclear explosion went off. But he goes in, he lets his swarm, do its thing. They take out the little bodyguards, but we actually got to see the ancients do some great stuff. Like, they got off the little things, I don't even know what the heck to call them, but they got off their little seats, and they do some fighting, and it was pretty cool. Like, even what they did, it wasn't as cool as Quinlan, like, flipping and spinning with that sword and, like, splitting, Strigoi in half and stuff, which was pretty awesome. But especially, there was one part. So they're like just destroying these things. They're like hitting them and slashing them across the face and just knocking them super far. And like they were doing like some double team stuff. Like there was one time where I think it was like the middle ancient like hit one to the left, and then the other ancient grabbed it and like twisted its head off after there. I was like, man, they're like doing double teams and stuff. And then there was one part where an ancient just grabbed a Stragoi's head and just like ripped it off with one hand. I was like, damn, like I rewound that scene because it was just like, and he just twisted the head clean off, and it was just one hand. I was like, holy crap, that was pretty awesome. But they're going through and just destroying these things. I'm sure, like I said, that they did get killed by the bomb, but Quinlan, he's going through and he's got his little machine gun in one hand, sword in the other, and he's flipping and spinning, he's blocking and chopping off heads and decapitations and chopping legs off, and he's like sliding on his knees and chopping them up. And he's spinning and splitting them in half and stuff. And I was like, this is an awesome scene with him. And he's just basically just going down the hall and he's shooting them up and stuff. And then he gets to a clearing and he tries to bolt out of there. I'm sure we'll see him a little bit wounded, but he'll actually be alive. It'll be interesting if he lost a limb, though. I think that would be interesting because they mentioned, you can attach them, but they don't really, grow back. So it would be interesting to see if they made that change for his character where he lost a hand or if he lost like a whole arm or something something crazy like that, because it seemed like it was a sunlight bomb at first, but it was just such a huge explosion that it looked like it was just an ultraviolet light going off. But it was just an enormous explosion that destroyed a couple of blocks. Like he was super, Eichorst was really far away when the bomb went off, but it was like, that's a couple of blocks he just destroyed there. And buildings, they were like caving into the ground. They weren't just like falling. They were like tumbling on top of each other, falling into like the ground. So it's going to be really intense in this next episode, and it seems like they still don't know where the master is exactly, and maybe the master's just doing that as a safety precaution. But it's freaking nuts. And like I said, we only got 2 episodes left, so that's really crazy. Then we have Eph and Dutch, who end up finding out that the signal from the master that was actually on the black box is still powerful enough to affect people. And so it completely knocks Dutch out. And then they have this scene where she's like, oh, maybe it's, based on you being a bit older, your sense of hearing and stuff like that. So they believe that with the black box having so much technology, not only would it have the recording, but they might have the actual microwave signal, or at least some data to replicate it, and have literally the full experience of the master's paralyzing effect, both the audio and the waves. So I don't know if they'll be able to create it by the next episode, or if things will get too crazy, if they'll be too busy just doing each other. Who knows? But they figured that out now. They make out when it gets to the ending section, and it was kind of funny because I was like, all right. So they had F, he put his hand on Dutch, and he's like, I couldn't do this without you. And it's like, all right, that seems like something they're hinting at there. And they kind of had it just a little, because it was just the 2 of them hanging out all the time. They kind of have similar issues a little. They both drink and stuff like that, and they just seem to work well together, even though they're both a bit dysfunctional. And I was like, okay, this could happen. It didn't seem like it would before, but then they kind of went full force with it. It was like, I could see it as a possibility, and then they did, like, the first actual hint was in this episode, I think. They may have had, like, one other one, but this is a big one where, he puts his hand on her leg, and it's like, it could have been nothing. But then she comes back with the fantasy of the nurse and all that stuff, and I'm like, okay, let's see where this goes, because it seems like it could only go in one possible way, and it does. He could have said no or something like that if he didn't feel anything for her, but he did. So they have mutual attraction, they start making out, so they're going to be a thing. Who knows how long that'll last. It would really suck if they killed Dutch. We already lost one actual important character in Nora last season, so it would suck if that happened again, but I'm hoping they wouldn't do that. They won't kill, especially if they did that where it's like, oh, they killed another girlfriend that F had, where it's like, oh, all the women he likes end up dying, and there's only like 3 main female characters in the whole series, and there've only been 4, and one of them has been killed off. And I get, I count Kelly, but it's kind of hard to count her because she's really not in it that often, so it's kind of only like 3 main female characters. But I doubt they'll do that where it's just like every time he has a girlfriend they end up dying. I don't think they'll do that. That'd be super cheapen Dutch's character as well if they did end up doing that, where it's just like, oh, now that's just the thing, every girlfriend he has gets killed. But we'll see where they go with this relationship. Considering this series, relationships do have a huge impact on how people react to things or act in general. So I don't mind it because I like all the characters, so I don't mind if they end up together. But at the same time, it's one of those things where it's just a huge case of leverage. And I don't know how crazy, especially, only 2 more episodes, I don't know how crazy things are going to get, where one of them ends up being a hostage and the other has to do something crazy, and maybe it'll result in them having to give up the black box or something, like this huge thing they can use to disrupt, all the signals between the Strigoi. What's going to happen there. So I don't mind it. I like the characters, like I said. I don't mind them being together. I just hope it doesn't have a terrible effect, but it probably will. And then the final story was like the emotional story with Gus in this episode, where they talk about, well, they don't even talk about it, they just show his past. They show him and his mother, and the first thing is the 2 of them with black eyes, and it's like, okay. He mentioned his father early on when they were at the medical place, and the guy's like, oh, you can help your father or whatever. He's like, oh, this isn't my father was a coward. So they go back, in time, and we see what happens. Like, okay, and I like, just based on that, I was like, all right, that's why he called him a coward. He would beat on his wife and his child. And probably, I mean, his brother, I guess, was a few years younger, and he seemed really young then, so he probably wasn't hitting his younger brother at that time. And never, I guess, considering what happened in the other flashbacks. But it goes through, and it's him and his mother, and he just has to deal with some of the things that have happened, and he has to learn these lessons really fast about being the new man of the house. And they go through, and it's his uncle and his uncle's buddy, probably, just another uncle or just his uncle's buddy. And they talk about, like, oh, your father left and stuff, and they show, like, their knuckles are messed up. Like, they beat that guy to death because of what he did for the who knows how many times, So it's like, all right, this has happened time and time again. As my sister, her brother was like, I let it go because that's what you wanted, but I said what would happen if he ever did it again, and he did, so that's all there is to it. You don't keep feeding a rabid dog that attacks your son type of thing. So, we go through all of that, and then, it goes to right before the series began, where he's like, I need a little bit extra money, and that's how he ends up running into Eichorst, because he gets the car from his buddy at the bar, and he's just like, man, I screwed up. I did all of this. Every decision I made led to her being killed, because if it weren't for me, then, in his mind at least, because he's the one who did it, it's like, if it weren't for me, none of this stuff would have happened in the city, although I'm sure someone else would have done it, of course, but he was, he was the one that did it. So for him, it's like, every decision that I made just ended up getting her killed. Like, I screwed all this stuff up. And how his plan is just to take off. He and Angel are just going to go. And I don't think it'll be that easy, but they're at least going to try to. So we'll see how that plays out. But I really like getting to see his side of the story in this episode. I thought it was definitely emotional. And him just going through that. And then he has to save Gus, or he has to save Angel at the end of the episode. And he has to shoot his mom. It's like he comes back. And Angel is there, and there's nothing he can do. Like, his little brass knuckle, it drops on the ground. He doesn't want to make any sudden movements. And Gus just has to do it. He just has to shoot what's left of his mother. And that's it. Like, he's just stuck with that decision. And it hurts him, and it's just like, man, I just didn't want you hurt. And I was like, I really like this moment. And so now that his plan is to leave, I think that might be a cool story for the next season if they do get out of the city and we just see what they decide to do. Like, all right, do we act as if this doesn't isn't happening, or do we try to find a way to get answers basically in the outside world, pretty much. So I'm excited to see what they do with the two of them. They might get stuck in the city, they might actually escape, and it's something new that we get to see. But either way, I'm excited to see 2 more episodes. It seems like we're going to have a lot of crazy battling in this next one for sure. And then, who knows with the finale. But I'm very excited, of course. Definitely want to know what you guys thought about this episode. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, least favorite parts. And with this new master coming in, and also with, I'm assuming, the other ancients being killed off, I want to know what you guys are expecting from the master and this new ancient teaming up. Like, is it going to be really simple? Is it going to be they just work together and it's fine? Or is there going to be a 3-way battle in the next season? Will we have the master versus this other ancient, with both of them controlling their own Strigoi, and then them also trying to take out the rest of the city, not together, but at the same time? And it's, are we going to get a 3-way war? Are they going to work together? Do you guys think the master is going to be killed off and replaced with this new ancient? There are quite a few possibilities. My theory, honestly, is that either they'll work together or it'll be the 3-way war thing. I don't think one of them will instantly be able to kill off the other, even though the new ancient will be weaker. And maybe it'll start that way. Maybe it'll start off where they flat out work together, and then the other ancient is like, alright, I've gotten my strength back, I'm going to make my little secret army, and then once I build that up, we're taking out the city together, you have yours, I have mine. Then we'll start to do the 3-way war thing. And I feel like that might be how it plays out, because this ancient has been locked up for such a long time that it needs to kind of come to terms with some of the defenses that humans have now compared to centuries ago, So I feel like that might be how it plays out. They start off as teammates, and then we get the normal villain thing where eventually they start going against each other as well as the good guys. So that's my guess on it. It kind of mixes two of them together, but I want to know your theories on how it's going to play out. And of course, I want to know what you guys thought about this episode in general, so please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.